CargoWise Landside is deeply committed to revolutionizing landside logistics. With a complete enterprise system built for modern trucking and container drayage operators that includes proven drayage transportation management, digital rate and quote management, real-time container track and tracing, and on-demand truck, trailer, and container storage. Excellence in container drayage starts with the right software. Enhance transportation management, optimize shipment execution, and improve intermodal business operations with Trinium TMS, Draymaster, GeoStamp Track, and SecureSpace. To learn more, please visit cargowise.com/landside.
Hey everybody, welcome to Casual Friday on LogTech Live. I'm Eric Johnson. Oh, actually, no, I'm not Eric Johnson. I'm filling in for Eric Johnson. I'm Brian Glick. I'm the founder and CEO at Chain.io, and also a longtime fan of the show and excited to be back guest hosting for the second time. So let's buckle in. It's going to be an exciting hour. We're going to talk all about rates, everybody's favorite topic. We're going to talk about some fun news. Apparently, there was some stuff going on this week that's already resolved itself, but we'll chat about it anyway. And so let's get going. First of all, let's talk about some upcoming events. As you all know, TPM is the biggest ocean freight event in North America. So make sure that if you're interested, you get those tickets for Long Beach. I'm excited. I just got my email yesterday from the bar across the street from the show telling us what the specials are going to be, which is always the most important part of any show. So advanced purchase rates are still available for TPM. Go grab your tickets there. And also reminder, if you're having trouble getting to TPM, you can always look into the blended pledge or contribute to the blended pledge if you want to help other people get to events, get speaking spots for people who may be struggling or have be in an underrepresented group. Blended Pledge is a nonprofit charitable organization that brings together the global community with authentic conversations and shares stories about diversity, inclusion, and creating more acceptance across industries. And then if you can't get enough of me and you just enjoying this so much and you want more, make sure to check out on any podcasting platform Supply Chain Connections, a really fun show that we put out from Chain.io, where I talk to senior executives from all over the industry, and we really make it personal and talk about their life stories and how they got into the business and how they grew and what they find interesting. And really it's designed to be a peek behind the scenes of the kind of conversations that happen at those events and in the hallways and at the cocktail hours. So you can get a sense of that, even if you can't be at all of these great industry events and fly all over the world. So super excited to have more listeners there and get your feedback. I know it's a little peek behind the curtains for me. Got a text the other day from a CIO in the industry who took a picture of my podcast on his dashboard of his car while he was listening. And I'll say for all of us who do this kind of media stuff, it is really great to get that kind of feedback. And it's quite flattering for a kid who just got a job crawling under desks and plugging in wires for a customs broker 25 years ago and has stuck with it. And with that, let's get at the news of the week. So we're going to start with a chart that McKinsey put out this week about LogTech funding. As you can see in this chart, which is really the last 10 years, you can see there was that huge spike of funding. And then, during all the supply chain congestion woes, and then it really dropped off a cliff. That's a reality of the fact that investors often are chasing the latest, hottest thing and whatever's in the news. And so things have cooled down a lot. But what McKinsey was saying in the article that supports these charts is, their belief that supply chain and logistics covers about 10% of the global economy, and that those numbers are going to bounce back, and that there is a need and a demand for more tech in our industry, or maybe better tech sometimes, not more tech, and that there is going to be a recovery there. And I think the money that comes in from investors sometimes, again, follows the trends, but in the long term, we're all in an industry that is very critical and very important. And as our next article is going to show us, people get really scared when there might be supply chain congestion. Here's an article about the East Coast port strike, which, if you haven't heard, resolved itself overnight last night. So we have a stay of execution until January. So the agreement, as I understand it, is that work will continue to January, and the port workers have gotten an increase in salary, and the two parties will use the time between now and January to discuss automation and what the appropriate amount of automation is in the ports. And I'm sure that'll still be a contentious discussion, but we all get to wait until January to see how that resolves. The reason I wanted to pull up this particular article, though, and really bring it back to LogTech, is in this article, what you'll see is a lot of references to tech companies. The ability to use Vision API, as an example, as the way to track where the containers and the ships were moving, or there's some discussion with Everstream, who is a risk analytics platform. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember the last really bad West Coast port strike in 2014. All we had was rumors and phone calls to the carriers to try to figure out what's going on. And it really is a interesting indicator of how far we have come as an industry, that in general press on CNBC, that the acceptance that the log tech companies have information and really can paint a picture of what's going on in the industry, that is genuinely something that didn't happen 10 years ago. And so it's a really cool way of kind of getting an understanding and a perspective of how, even though we have a ways to go with tech in this industry, it really has changed almost completely over the last decade. And the last one, and this will really tie into our guest, is just wanted to bring up this chart, which is a more or less a live chart of the freight rates that Freightos keeps track of. And you can see that spike coming into the East Coast in preparation for the strike. The other thing that's interesting here, and we can talk to our guest Jay about this in a second, is no matter how good this data is, it doesn't change the fact that we're in a very opaque industry. And there were conversations going around on social media yesterday about $30,000 container rates, when the reality was maybe $5,000 container rates. And that, even with all the data we have, there's a lag, right? There's time it takes from someone agreeing to a rate for it to filter through all these systems, and for these aggregators like Zanetta and Freightos and et cetera to get the picture. So the numbers that you see and the rumors that you're hearing don't always match. And that's a big challenge for logisticians, especially if you're on the shipper side of the business, to really understand what's going on. But knowing that you have these resources is great. And again, 10 years ago, all you had was what your carrier rep was telling you, and you pretty much took it, or it was a take it or leave it situation. So it's amazing how far tech has come. And with that, let's introduce our guests. So let's get Jay up here. Jay is the co-founder of Wove. Wove is a company founded 2 years ago to solve the rate ingestion problem for forwarders who manually struggle with their carrier rate sheets. And Jay and I met in Europe last week. And I want to, before I let Jay jump in here, I want to just say something that I say. If anyone follows me on LinkedIn, you hear this in my videos all the time. Get out in the world. When you meet people, when you're in person with people, we happen to both be in Barcelona at an event last week, and we met. And Jay's on the show today because of that. We've known each other for all of, I think, an hour in person, and that's a really important lesson for everybody who's trying to grow. This is a relationship business, and relationships are not built over Zoom; they're built in rooms. So get out there in the world. And Jay, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. Could not agree more that relationships are built out in the world. And one of the reasons I think why I like this industry so much is that it's truly global. And enables you or anyone really trying to build in the space or just be in the space to meet people all around the world.
So before we came on, you were telling me about a fun little Atlanta tie-in that you had the other day. Why don't you tell that story real quick, and then we'll dive into what Wove does. So,
Yeah. So after I met Brian in Barcelona at the Freightos conference last week, I ended up in Copenhagen, and uh, as someone from Atlanta, it's a big city, but it's not New York or it's not LA. So when I see somebody in a public place with an Atlanta Braves hat on, especially after a big win, I'll say hello to somebody. And it just so happened that this person who I said hello to, I ended up I realized I had met at a bar here in Atlanta about 3 weeks earlier. And so yeah, it just shows that the world is truly global, but it's also truly a small place. And another reason why I'm just a big believer in talking to everybody and seeing how we're so well connected.
awesome. So tell me a little bit about what Wove does and what the problem is that you guys are solving.
Yeah. Uh, so first and foremost, I think one reason why we decided to pursue this particular problem of data and rate data ingestion is that it is truly a problem. And I can talk all about how my advice to other founders and entrepreneurs would be to make sure that you're actually solving a problem. And we did not do that in the first, I'd say, couple of years of Wove. We were, even before we stumbled into the logistics and supply chain space, we were actually building solutions in search of a problem, only for us to then discover the entire challenge of rate ingestion and data ingestion more broadly in supply chain and logistics. And um, something that we have been really conscious about doing over the last year is being incredibly targeted and narrow in our focus, at least at the earliest days, which Wove, I would say, is still very much in. And so the problem that we're focused right now on is taking unstructured and semi-structured rate data that mostly the ocean carriers are sending to forwarders. At least that's the part of the problem that we're focused on. And even though a lot of forwarders claim to be embedding automation in these workflows, a lot of that automation really is just outsourcing to teams of people to do a lot of manual data entry. And so when we heard about this problem, we took a look at one of the big trends right now, obviously, which is generative AI, and realized that right now is probably the best time to at least try to start solving this problem. And so we've spent, I would say, about the last year or so building an MVP and then ultimately a product that I wouldn't say completely solves the problem, but does come uh, close to solving it, at least in a pretty meaningful way. And so I
So
can talk all about that.
let's break down some basics for some people who may
Mhm,
either not be on the forwarder side or not be on the rate side. So
mhm,
what is let's just start at the very beginning, right? So uh, you as a if I'm sitting in a freight forwarder seat, right? What I have two different kinds of prices I think about. I have my sell rate, which is what I'm selling to my customer, and I have my buy rate, which is what I'm getting
mhm,
from Maersk or MSC or Hapag, which is the price that I'm going to move that container under, and then hopefully I'm going to sell it to my customer for the same or more money potentially, and make some money in the middle. And that's part of what a freight forwarder or NVOCC does. So you're focused on that buying side, right? The side where they're getting the rates from the carriers. How does that happen today without you? Like what do people do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say it's somewhat segmented based on the size of your forwarding operation. So we've been targeting medium to large size forwarders who are dealing with hundreds of trade lanes. And so from working with these guys now for the better part of a year, we've learned that most of this is really happening manually. So uh, a carrier will send a spreadsheet of rates typically every 2 weeks And then forwarders have either outsourced or their own people taking these rate sheets and then basically just doing manual data entry into templates and then uploading those templates into, say, systems of records like a rate management system or a TMS, which is then where a lot of that rate management and quoting workflows are done. And so, again, in the interest of being incredibly narrow and targeted in our focus, we have kind of limited our focus, at least again in kind of the early stages, to really focusing on that buy rate ingestion piece. So taking the rate sheets and then building a product that actually allows you to automate the parsing, ingestion, understanding of this data, but then also meeting our customers where they're already at, which is in spreadsheets and their existing systems of record. And so we're not actually trying to disrupt really any part of their workflow. And so the output that we're basically sending or communicating to our customers is the templates that they're already working in. We're just allowing them to do that translation piece in a matter of minutes rather than a matter of days. Because as you mentioned at the top, speed is really critical in an industry where rates are constantly changing.
Right. So I'm thinking this week, right? If I'm an importer and my boss is walking in and they're yelling at me that, oh my God, what's going on? I saw this thing on CNBC and rates are going through the roof. And I go back to the desk rep at my carrier and or my freight forwarder and they open up their system, they're probably still seeing rates from 2 weeks ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big gap because they know that $1,800 is not the right number. They want to give me an answer right now. I'm frustrated. My boss is frustrated. And if they could get the answer from the carrier into their system faster, they wouldn't have to say, I have to call you back after I check with my pricing team, right? Which is what they're probably saying, what they were probably saying to their customers yesterday while the strike was going on. Did I get that picture right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And there's also real concerns, I think, as far as even getting the actual container onto the ship, because sometimes you'll quote your customer, and then the container will arrive at the port, but then the container won't actually be loaded onto the ship because, and this kind of goes to the whole point of this being a relationship business. But if you're quoting with a quote that's since been it's I guess expired, there's real issues that in terms of actually getting cargo onto the ship, and then of course that really brings into or it really brings I don't know, actual consequences.
So you're using generative AI to solve some of this problem. And we're in sort of a point in this inflection curve where some people are very, very excited to hear things like that. Other people are starting to maybe eye roll because there's some companies out there that maybe are kind of BSing their way into sales because they're using that term. I know Eric, when we were both with him last week, he gave a presentation. He said, if the company is just talking about AI, don't buy from them, right? If they don't have a problem to solve. And then so you're at a position where you're problem first, right? So we're going to solve the rate problem. Why is that tech important to solve this problem?
Yeah, so I think first thing, it's selling AI is obviously not enough. You need to be solving a problem, and customers, frankly, don't care about the way in which you're solving that problem. They just want that problem to be solved, and it just so happens that for the particular problem we're solving, generative AI and large language models are actually uh, represent a fundamentally new way of being able to solve problems like this that we just truly don't believe were even solvable, at least to this extent. Uh, and just 2 or 3 years ago before these models became, I guess, so mainstream. And that's because, at least for the particular problem that we're solving, I think context is incredibly important. And so if you look at a rate sheet, there's just to really get an understanding, to know how to actually ingest it and understand the meaning of the sheet, you really need to know the context. That's because a lot of the data that you need to understand is unstructured, especially when it comes
What
to
does
things like
that word mean? What
surcharges.
is unstructured data versus structured data?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think we probably overuse the term structured versus unstructured. I think when we talk about structured data versus unstructured data, we're talking about maybe the consistency that in terms of the formatting of the data. And so with the carrier rate sheets, each carrier kind of has its own template that they're sending the data in, but these templates are constantly changing, and they can also change based on the particular office that is, or the particular rep that's sending the data. And so that's kind of what I mean when I talk about unstructured data. But then I guess on a more technical level as well, in a lot of these rate sheets, you'll have tables with the rates and the surcharges and kind of the origins and destinations and things like that. But then outside of the tables, you'll have comments about maybe the applicability of a surcharge, and saying that maybe a surcharge only applies for when a container is going from a certain port to a certain destination or under the particular conditions. And so that's also what we mean by unstructured data.
So you've got to be able to read that note,
Mhm.
and I'm going to use the word understand here in a very loose term, but like essentially understand what that note means and figure out what that means in the template that you're in the system that you're sending it out to, which might have a different understanding of the terminology than the system than where you got the sheet from. Is that
Yeah, so
right?
we kind of do I'd say like a middle process as well, where we're like translating the data from the rate sheets into a schema that we've built that's particularly focused on ocean rates. And so then from there, we can map the schema to whatever template that we're then outputting the data into.
That's very, very similar to how Chain.io works. We live in the structured world. So I think a really good example maybe for everyone of, when people talk about, and it is important when you have these conversations with vendors and they say unstructured versus structured. When I started in supply chain and I was working for a customs broker, one of the big challenges that a customs broker always has is you want to get emailed copies of documents from the overseas factories for what's coming in. And what you don't want to do is have somebody sitting at a desk all day, opening the email, looking at the document, figuring out what kind of document it is and what shipment it's for, and attaching that to the shipment in your custom software. So what you do is you go out and you create an SOP and you tell the factories, every time you send the document, I need the subject line to have the purchase order number, and the name of the file for the commercial invoice has to be the commercial invoice number and underscore CI
Mm.
underscore the date. And if everything is perfect, then we have a script that will bring that in and attach it. And for the other 99% that somebody screws up manually, we still have that person sitting here, because back in 2000, we needed everything to be structured data. Whereas if we applied an AI solution or Gen AI solution to this model, we could say, make sure you put somewhere in the email what the commercial invoice number is and that it's a commercial invoice attached. And the computer can now be much smarter about
Mhm.
figuring out, okay, well, this factory sent the invoice number in the subject line, and this one it's in the body of the email, or maybe this one they didn't include at all, but we can read the document and see what it is. Is that the difference? Is that kind of did I get that right?
Yeah, I mean that the same thing is certainly true in the documents that we're looking at.
Mhm.
Um, because I would say the status quo, the way that a lot of the companies that we talk to, the way that they're currently working, is they're doing things like the kind of mappings that you're talking about, where it has to be perfect. But we know that oftentimes a carrier might add a column in a carrier rate sheet, um, or they, because these things are not perfect, they're not standardized. But if you're relying on kind of the older way of solving these problems, it's just it's not a matter of if but when it's going to break. And using AI tools, especially generative AI, certainly allows you to have a lot more flexibility in terms of not needing the data to be as perfect. And so, yeah, for example, with us, we can understand critical components of a rate sheet, such as like the names of the carrier, the applicability dates, the respective origin destination ports, even if it's just in the name, but it doesn't have to be like a perfectly formatted syntax like what you mentioned.
Yeah.
And
So you mentioned at the beginning that you initially sort of were in search of a problem to solve, and you had tech, and then you found this problem, and it was interesting to you. Why was this problem interesting? Like what was the journey to go from like we're wandering in the woods to, oh my God, we have this hyper focused company just on rate
yeah,
ingestion in freight forwarding, which, to be honest, and I've been in this a long time, not the thing that when I was the day out of college that I would have picked to spend my life with. So like, how'd you get there?
yeah, it's a great question, and yeah, as you kind of mentioned at the top, we started Wove about 2 to 3 years ago. We actually did not start at all in supply chain. We were in a very different space, and I think the most important trait to have, if for some crazy reason you want to start a company and pursue make this your life's work, is just to follow your curiosity, but also be incredibly resilient in the face of so much uncertainty. And I think for us, we were very good about following our curiosities. We also had some helpful advisors and mentors who kind of pushed us in this direction. And then ultimately, it really just came down to us talking to a lot of people who've spent far more time in the industry than we have, and just asking them about problems that they thought we might be uniquely capable of solving. And when we learned about kind of rate management and rate ingestion, um, that the light bulb kind of went off that this is at least a problem that we could start to solve. But then actually, I think that we've become even more narrowly targeted with our focus as we've started to work with customers. And so what's been the most helpful thing for us has just been finding true operational design partners. Because without them, if we were just on our own, kind of trying to build a product, I think that we would not be in the right position to be able to do that, because us as a founding team, and we use this to our benefit, but we don't have decades of experience as freight forwarders or as shippers or on the carrier side. And so we've just followed our curiosities, but also paired our curiosity with people and companies that do face this problem day in and day out.
So I'm going to pay you a compliment here, and I don't know that there's going to be a question at the end. So we'll see how this wraps up. But I do want to give you a compliment. One of the things that has been a topic really in the last 5 to 7 years in this industry is outsiders who come in who have not paid their dues, working through operations or working through an IT department inside of a company, and then coming in with a very let's say obnoxious attitude around everyone who's been doing this for the last 3,000 years must be stupid, and I'm just going to fix this next week. And fundamentally, it's just everybody's dumb, and we're just going to disrupt, and we'll say that word, and therefore magic will happen. So I very much appreciate your spirit of partnering with people who understand the intricacies of these problems and then moving the ball forward from there, as opposed to coming in and just saying like, oh, how could this possibly be hard? It's just the price. We're just going to fix the problem for everyone because clearly they all didn't think about it before. So I appreciate that. And I know that a lot of your customers likely will as well. So.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, we are realists, and we've also come to learn that this industry, the people who make all this magic happen behind the scenes are certainly they are not dumb. They love what they do, and they might be a little bit hesitant and skeptical about the innovation that has been promised to them from a lot of the big companies over the last 10 years. But I think for us, we're really letting our work and our product speak more than kind of our action or our words online and kind of things like that.
So you guys are in still a pretty early stage, and I know you're working with some pilots and some customers that you're going through. Who would be who are you looking to talk to? What's the next stage? Like, what does a good partner for you mean at this phase of your company?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a question I think about constantly because I'd say over the course of the past couple of months, as we've been working with our main design partners and getting some validation there that this might actually be working, and it's allowed us to have the confidence to kind of go out and at least in a narrow fashion, but target kind of some other prospects and start having some really interesting conversations. And what we've also realized is that this problem that we're solving is not limited just to freight forwarders. It's this whole data ingestion, rate data ingestion problem is faced by other technology companies. It's faced by shippers. It's even faced by some of the carriers in kind of their, at least the carriers that have larger operations. And so it's been fascinating to us to learn about how much of kind of a wedge use case this is, because that's actually not something that we realized, I think, when we first started doing this over a year ago. And so as far as kind of the right partners for us to be talking to at this stage, we love talking to forwarders, small, medium, and large. I think that because we're a small team, talking to the largest guys is a little bit of a challenge because they just have they're a bit more challenging to work with. But really, what we've also learned is that the underlying, I'd say, workflow that we're solving a problem for is really any sort of spreadsheet translation workflow. So like we're focusing right now on taking carrier rate data and turning that into a standard template, but the same workflow can be applied to things like RFQs and procurements and tenders, and I'm sure a variety of other workflows that we aren't even familiar with right now. So we're starting to have conversations to learn more about that, and then other kind of workflows we can build on top of this, because I think that if you enable companies to actually take advantage of data that they maybe historically have never been able to take advantage of, there's a lot of other avenues to and value to create on top of that.
So in that kind of journey of getting to those customers and everything, you've chosen to found the company in Atlanta. And Atlanta is a really unique place to be right now in tech, especially in logistics tech. And I think it's one of the most interesting communities, it really in the world when it comes to that. But it's also something that not a lot of people know about the community in Atlanta, and how close knit everybody is, and really especially in and around your alma mater at Georgia Tech. So what's great about, I mean, I know because I visit all the time, but tell me what's great about Atlanta. Be a cheerleader for your city and the tech scene there.
Yeah, no, thanks for allowing me to do this, because I love hyping up Atlanta any chance I get. I would say the biggest benefit of building in Atlanta, living in Atlanta, is just the access to diverse world-class talent. That's talent that's maybe homegrown from Georgia Tech or from Emory or from Georgia State or any of the HBCUs we have here in the city, but also talent that just finds their way to moving here to work for any of the large Fortune 500 companies, or even the many of the promising startups that we have living in or building in Atlanta, like Wove is. And I think what's also interesting about Atlanta, just from an entrepreneurial perspective, is that we're not really known for one particular focus. I think maybe the legacy Atlanta startups from 10, 15 years ago were more in kind of B2B SaaS, but that's since expanded quite considerably. And I think that's because the Fortune 500 customer base here is also incredibly diverse, from companies like UPS to Delta to Home Depot to really a bunch of kind of legacy fintech companies. There's all sorts of industries that are based here, and that the fact that so many companies are from here and based here means that there's just a ton of talent and a ton of institutional knowledge that's based here as well. And I think that what I've also found, both in the startup scene and just more broadly kind of in the social scene here, is that everybody here is very collaborative, and I'm sure there are companies here that might be competing with one another, both for talent, for capital, and also maybe just in their respective markets. But it really is a rising tide lifts all boats kind of environment, because I think everybody here really wants to work collaboratively to put Atlanta on the map and to keep growing our presence around the world.
Yeah.
And
One of the
if I
things
can
that
be a
I've
tiny
found,
part of that, then
yeah,
that's great.
yeah, one of the things that I found interesting, if you compare Atlanta to, a New York or even where I am in Philadelphia, is, in my experience down there, if you're going in to be a startup and you want to get feedback as a B2B company, like the engagement that the people at a Georgia Pacific or a Georgia Power or a Coca-Cola have with that community is dramatically high. Like it's a form of social credit in Atlanta. If you are in a big company and you are engaging with other Atlanta companies and that Atlanta tech scene, people
Mhm.
brag about that. And that is not necessarily true everywhere. I think in New York, you could be in the same building with a Fortune 500 and never meet someone from that company or never talk to them in the elevator. Whereas in Atlanta, it still has it'd be trite to say a small town feel, but a community that prides itself on people working with people from other companies and sharing knowledge, which is it brings a lot of energy into that city. So.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's one of the characteristics that makes this city so unique.
So give me a piece of advice or something that you've learned along this journey over the last couple of years that you think would be good to kind of pass on to the listeners, or just maybe something that's been on your mind.
Yeah, so I guess I would break this up into two separate pieces of advice for two distinct types of listeners.
Mhm.
Uh, I've mentioned this a little bit, but if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a founder, if you're thinking about being an entrepreneur or founder, I would just implore you to make sure that you're actually solving a problem, because I truly believe now, having started this by not solving a problem and then moving into actually solving a problem, that your life just becomes so much easier when you are actually solving a problem, because it helps you with storytelling, and then it helps you with finding those design partners and customers, because you're just able to tell your story so much better. You're able to clearly communicate that you're solving this problem for this person or for this company, and life is just so much easier when that's the case. I would say for logistics professionals, I think my advice, and not that I'm really in a position to be giving advice to people who have much more
Fresh
experience than
ideas
I
are
do.
always welcome.
Yeah, I would just say be encouraging of kind of young people and young entrepreneurs or older entrepreneurs as well, but who are bringing fresh ideas into this space. And I totally understand why there might be a lot of skepticism of new entrants and new companies that have made bold claims like that they're disrupting the entire industry, this industry that's worked by and large kind of the same for the last couple hundred years. Um, but I think that we shouldn't let the companies that have maybe been the loudest but delivered the least define kind of this next phase of companies trying to build in the space. You certainly being one of those promising companies as well, because I think everybody who's entering logistics is entering this space not because it's easy, but because they see how important this industry is just for the world, and they think that maybe they are capable of improving it even by 1%. And in such a big industry, 1% makes a massive difference.
And I guess last question, did you go out to Walmart yesterday and panic buy toilet paper?
I'm actually like terrible at consumerism and buying stuff. So no, I did not. However, I did get a text from my mom asking me if she thought that she should go out to Costco and buy a bunch of stuff. And I actually told her it may not be the worst idea.
Yeah, I think it's always good to have some safety stock, right? And you should probably have that all the time. I think we've seen enough disasters, natural and man-made, to know that. But it is interesting though that if once you get in this business, and I'm sure every person who's watching or listening to this episode will agree, everyone in your family suddenly thinks you know every single thing about what's going on in the global supply chain because you happen to have a job that is somewhat supply chain adjacent. So I think we were all fielding those texts and messages, at least those of us here on the East Coast of the U.S. Over the course of this week. So Jay, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was, great to chat with you. It's always exciting for me to talk with new businesses, to really understand where people are coming from. And I'll remind everyone again, this is exactly the kind of conversations we have over on my podcast. So Jay, we'll probably have to get you over there soon, and we can have do a deeper dive. So
Yeah,
thanks for coming on.
we love it. Thanks, Brian, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to finally be a guest on a podcast. It's a true dream come true.
I guess I'm glad you set your goals low. So, and I know Mr. Johnson would be very upset with me if we didn't wrap up this show with a dad joke. So I have one for you, and I figured let's keep it topical this week. So why don't you go bowling with a longshoreman? They're constantly throwing strikes. And with that, thank you, everyone. It was great to be able to be a guest host this week. Again, Eric will be back soon. He had a little unexpected travel to jump in on, and as always, let's make sure that you're subscribed to all the Let's Talk Supply Chain content. I have the proud honor of being one of the first listeners, I would say, all the way back in the day when it was pretty much just Sarah hanging out. So again, appreciate all of the honor of being able to guest host, and thank you all for tuning in.